Lord, the strength of my salvation. You have covered my head in the day of battle. Do not grant, O Lord, the desires of the wicked. Do not further his wicked schemes, lest they be exalted. So we are at a moment in time of reflection. 45 years, that means that we are grown up now. We are adults. And so we should behave as such.
Wonderful. I'm really glad for that introduction, OJ. I know that you and Lily are doing very well. So my blessings upon all of you as well. I expect there to be maybe some maybe emotional, nostalgic moments because you were so intimately involved with this thing. But I don't mind that this morning, and I'm sure our listeners in Dominica and everywhere else wouldn't mind that at all. Give us a little backdrop, OJ, when we speak about the independence of the nation. Give us a little backdrop on the genesis and how this thing grew uh, prior to November 3rd, 1978.
Well, first of all, we came in 1975. Patrick called it the electrifying team. And there were quite a number of us young persons who ventured into the business of the management of our country. And in 75, many of us came with a vision and expectation. And of course, that was brought about by the fact that we had a leader prior to Patrick, which is Yoli Blanc, who had dreams of a social revolution. And so the intent, therefore, was to have come into a place of change where the have-nots became equal to those who have. And so many concepts and policies and ideas were expected to be transferred into reality. And among them was the need for our independence. Prior to that, Britain was responsible for foreign affairs. We had no presence at the United Nations or any other international body for that matter. And we were unable then to have found our voice in the wider business of international policies and politics and all that goes with it. And so Patrick John, who was our leader, was very instrumental in ensuring that we keep our head focused in the right direction. I was the president of the party for a considerable period of time leading up to independence. And the party then was very vibrant. It was a party that was designed to create an expectation that all shall eat and so on. And as a result of that, independence kept being way into our very psyche of wanting to see a change. And so Patrick then had the Salisbury Declaration, and that was followed by the need and desire for going forward to the British government and insisting that our time had come for us to seek our own way in the forays of the parliaments of the world. And so that's how it all began. That's where the story began. And so our energy and our zeal and our passion for Dominica was based upon the need for land reform, for a number of other policies. And so those policies were transmitted through the vision of Leblanc, one of which was the Beach Ordnance Act, which is to say that all our beaches belong to us, the land policies to ensure that all lands belong to the Dominican people, and that if anybody wanted to be foreign and to earn any portion of our land, they must give very good reason for it. So these were some of the issues for us. How do we change the landscape, the economic, socio-economic landscape? These were the issues that were before us. And independence seemed to have been what do you call the drawing board, the board on which the chalk would be written as to what the decisions of our future would be. And that's what independence meant.
You have raised for me quite a number of things that I'm sure lots of people would probably not know about. Referencing, for example, bringing some kind of equality between the haves and the have-nots. And you mentioned very instructively the whole question of the beach access to the beach. I remember around that time, I think there was a Calypsonian in Antigua who wrote the song "The Beach Is Mine, I Can Bathe Anytime."
Yeah, right, right.
And a lot of people don't understand that aspect. The whole question of land reform. What was it that propelled the, for example, the question of land reform? We understand that we were divided into quite a few large estates all over the country. What was behind the mind of that cabinet at the time, coming from the Leblanc era, that propelled the equality, if you like, or the wealth distribution of the nation that you can tie to the independence?
I'm happy you asked that question because I think that's the linchpin, if you want to call that, the very focused area of my particular persuasion as a minister of government. In fact, when I was made Minister of Agriculture and thereon, I used it as my mission. The reason for that was about 90% of the arable lands of Dominica was owned by maybe 5% of the population. If you start off all the way from Soufriere with the ownership by Elrose and Company and coming by J.B. Charles and all the way across the Roll family and so on, Daniel Green, and you go down the road, H.D. Shillingford, then Douglas, then Larville and Armour, and so on. And then you move on to the other side with Conrad Cyrus and the people who came from Tabor and Leach of Rosalie Estate and other estates in Delices and so on, and Granby, of course, the Nassif eventually owned some parts of it. So what you saw was that most of the large areas of arable lands was owned by those who were privileged. In fact, it was those privileged people who formed the governments before universal adult suffrage in 1951. Most of the persons who were in government were persons who are large landowners of our country. They were, in fact, by the specification of the rights to vote, meant that they were the ones who were privileged. And so there's a lot of information that indicated that a lot of lands were taken arbitrarily and acquisitively by such persons for their own benefit. And so it was that a mission, my mission, the mission of government, the mission of Patrick John, following Leblanc, was to ensure that we had some equality. And with this proportionate ownership of land by just a few, and the fact that our people who were brought up working on the estates, my grandmother worked on the estates in the east part of Dominica, of the Pembertons. Shelto Pemberton, I think, as a judge, and these people had lands there. And so I grew out of this situation where my father was from the Coolibistry area, just like you. And the lands there were owned by H.D. Shillingford and Montrachet and up in the different parts of Macroshri, etc. In fact, Salisbury areas. And so it was an intent to ensure, and I wish to spend a little bit more time on it, although I know the kind of time frame that we have doesn't allow us to be too expansive, but I would like to be expanding on this because people may not know it. But my time in government, and if people were to ask me what you did, that would give you a legacy, and I would say it's land reform, because the lands of Belleville-Chopin, of Soufriere, of Mont Prosper, of Wharton Waven, of parts of Layu, etc., and in Shanson, Portsmouth, in the Picard area, all of that was acquired during the time of my being a Minister of Agriculture. And so that is why I think is an imperative for what we are looking at in terms of a vision for Dominica coming out of Leblanc and of Patrick John and that administration.
I wanted to expand on it myself because I believe that people have to come to an understanding, a proper knowledge of what it meant for the framers then, the visionaries then, of taking the country from a position of statehood to independence, what it meant for the people, what you all were thinking. That in fact, and I'm glad you mentioned the statistics that the large majority of arable land was owned by probably 5% of the people. And that is essential for us to form a basis. Now, let me just pause a while to say to all of you in the audience, you can call your friends. We are live on the Q95 Facebook page as well as the Q95 YouTube page as well. So, it's good that you check us out and join the conversation. Now, OJ, coming from that era, it means that PJ, Patrick Rowland John, who was then Prime Minister and from leadership of that cabinet, and the rest of you who formed the cabinet seem to have had one mind with regard to that. But it is my understanding that all was not plain sailing, in the sense that while you were thinking of ensuring that the large majority of the people got a fairer share, so to speak, of the country, there was some level of opposition to that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the reality is that we were faced with uphill battle. As you will appreciate, the landowners, the persons who were in the mercantile sector, the Dominic Association of Industry and Commerce, they were not in alignment with what was then regarded as socialist policies. Land acquisition by itself meant that you're taking land from an owner and this redistributing that land. However, we also had crown lands, and those crown lands in places like Glogomie and up in the area of the east and north of Dominica, in Marigot area and Wesley area and Salisbury area. Those lands that belonged to government was redistributed. Of course, we had issues of the 45 square mile situation of Don Pearson and so forth, where an offer was being made to do a free zone. And there was, of course, some situations which led to some difficulties in the cabinet itself, being one of them being Minister of Agriculture. But I would not like to get into too much of that at this time, except to say that we were able to work ourselves through all of this, because in every democratic constitutional government aspect of our existence, if you do not have resistance to certain elements of policy, then you have a dictatorship. And so what we had then was a free movement of thinking processes taking place within the cabinet, where there's agreement and disagreements. And of course, Patrick did have his moments when he did get through some resistance. But what was positively, where all of us were in unison, was the need for independence. And that particularly was significant. And I listened to a lot of the historians, the pundits, the persons who are framers of our history, etc. And sometimes I wonder which part of the world were they. And most of them, to be fair to them, were too young to recall some of the incidents and situations that led us to independence. And so it is now that we have a meeting of the kind we're doing right now, that an opportunity has been given us to give some clarity as to truth, to reality, as opposed to fiction and persons being made heroes that are not, etc. So these are my thoughts on this. For example, we know that there were some persons within the communities of Dominica that came forward and tried to assist the dialogue on independence. I mean, there was a fact that we needed to have support from the youth of the country at the time. And there were lots of young men who came forward. I mean, names that are not even mentioned, people like Para Rivera, Bernard Wilshire, for example. Bernard Wilshire was, I believe, the founder member of the PIC. Pierre Charles was on the second layer of leadership in the Grand Bay area and so on. And of course, there was Gabriel Christian, a young man who was going to school, I think academy or just about leaving school. And he was also a PIC member, Hilarion Dejean and so forth in the Roseau area. So it was a number of persons out there who gave support to what already was an established fact, that since 75, the intention was to have independence. And so it was not anybody outside of the Labour Party's executive under the Labour Party cabinet and Labour Party government that came into the idea of seeking independence. We did get support from Ruthie Douglas and the others that were part of that team. And I understand that Bernard was the leader of the PIC at the time. So, we got support. Of course, we got throwback. There was this our venerable historian, Lennox Honeychurch, who had written a booklet called Think It Over. So there are lots of intent, of course, was to show that we're not ready yet and so forth. But the suspicion then, and I hate to be so lengthy, but I can't allow this opportunity to let its chance go by without mentioning it. There was huge opposition by the opposition party of the day, the Freedom Party. They didn't want Patrick John to be the first prime minister of Dominica for all the obvious reasons. It's just all sentimental, and it had to do with the bias of the power structure within the social ambit of Dominica.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and we will probably visit that opposition again in terms of what happened. But let's move forward a little bit as to your crystallize that vision and then formulated a team, a negotiating team. I don't know what you call it at the time, to go to the UK to speak with the UK government about that. Let's chat about, as far as you can remember, the composition of that team and give us a synopsis, for example, of how things went as far as that conversation was concerned.
Very good. I'm very happy you raised this, though, because for some reason, we have a mentality of forgetting. We have a memoir pool mentality, in Dominica, and a selective memory, of course. So that we will hear of the team that went, which would included, I believe, Moise and LeBlanc and Eustace Francis and Michael Douglas and Honeychurch and Eugenia Charles and so forth, of course, Patrick John, Leo Austin, and so on. They went in to formulate the formalities of independence. But the first team that went out to inform the UK government of our intent and our desire and our commitment and our determination for independence included the following, which is Patrick John, Leo Austin, Victor Rivera, and myself. And so the four of us had gone to England to inform the British government and the various agencies of government there that it has become an imperative for us as a conscious people to want to seek to plow our own canoe through the forests of life, and also to have an oar to chart our boat course in the various oceans of the world. And so that is what we went for. Interestingly enough, and I think it's worth mentioning a little bit, especially for the younger people, independence didn't come easily to Dominica. We had to fight our way through the opposition forces. And I recall distinctly, and here's some humor involved in that as well, that once we went to England and we informed the British Crown about it, the Freedom Party government, and of course all the various agents of the Freedom Party, which comprised a very large extent of persons who came from unfortunately came from the trade union movement, from which was birthed the Labour Party. But they chose to support the Freedom Party. And so they were very good at amassing counter, revolutionary spirit in the country. And so there was a huge demand by the opposition for people to gather on our return from London. And persons may recall that, those who wish to recall, that is, that there was that huge, massive demonstration and crowd outside the bridge, in fact, on the road from the bridge of the Isilo Black Bridge, all the way down through, almost down to the Labour, the trade union movement area, and almost as far as that, a huge crowd. And so when we came back from England, I recall Desiree John, the wife of Prime Minister John, calling us, or calling him, and saying to him, Patrick, they're planning to do damage to you. There's a lot of violence when you get into Roseau, it's not going to be easy, And so Patrick discussed it, and I think the heroism of Patrick was demonstrated to me then, because with me, I tend to think in terms of how do we beat the enemy by a science of how to achieve the objective without being affected. However, and so I suggested that to Patrick, I recall very distinctly, that we should now pass through um, up, upper part of Goodwill and go over the bypass there and through the botanical gardens on our way to our homes, because Patrick, John, Lee, Austin, and I stayed at Mount Bruce. And I thought that's a good way. So let them just hang out there with all their placards and their demonstrations by the bridge, and we will not pass there. And Patrick very, very aggressively said, there's no one who makes me pass any back door. I'm going through with it. Who want to stay with me, stay with me, but I am not going to let these people make me pass through any back door to my country when I'm just coming from seeking independence for my country. And that was clearly said. And then Vic Revere was the one who said, well, I don't know about them, when I pass through Maho, I have my gun and all of that stuff and what have you. And then when we reached Maho, guess what? Vic Revere decided to disembark. So he went to his home and he left Patrick, Leo, and myself to face the music. And when we did come into the bridge, honestly, there was a massive crowd. And they were beating down on the vehicle. We thought that they would even break the glass and all of that. And the driver was driving very cautiously and carefully so that you don't knock anybody in the process. And they were screaming and shouting, and it was a massive, aggressive, negative attack on us, But my faith in Patrick as a leader grew at that moment because he was the one who decided we should go through that furor. So that was really some of the experiences that we had. And of course, the fact that we had young people, and that's important, that young people stood up for independence. And I'm not so sure we are seeing that fervor and zeal and activity and energy and desire for change by young people of Dominica of today. I think the young people of that generation had done what this generation can learn from.
And that is maybe for another conversation, because I'm thinking that back then young people probably had a greater interest in what's happening around them. All right, so move forward. You came back, and we've planned this whole ceremony. And was it Prince Charles who came for independence?
Princess Margaret.
Princess Margaret came for independence, and the planning was there. And correct me, I mean, I have some memory of this thing a little bit, but since you were in the bowels of it, I'm sure you'll be able to help us in that regard. The opposition to that grew such that, if I recall, against the dress code, for example, of the formal dress code, if I recall, then Mary Junior Charles came with what was called a halter back or something like that, in opposition to what was happening then. Am I correct?
Yeah, she did in fact come with what was basically a swimsuit, to demonstrate well at the parliament, because she wanted to show it wasn't at the independence ceremony itself, but in the parliament. And her intent was to demonstrate that this whole code of dress thing didn't make any sense to her, and she was accustomed to this bourgeois approach of attire and of the three-piece suit and all the fancy long dresses and things of that sort and what have you, the maxis and so. And so, when it came up that we did a code of dress, which demonstrated really, in fact, it began with LeBlanc, the shirt jacks and whatnot. And I would like to just impose another thought about this dress code, because the Queen and the Prince Philip came into Antigua on the Royal Yacht Britannia, and Patrick, as usual, never liked to deal with all these fanciful ceremonial things and so forth. And so he elected me to represent him at this event and to be at the luncheon of the Queen on the Royal Yacht. And I dressed that dress code similar to what we are talking about. And Prince Philip then came at a shirt jack, long sleeves and so on, a Nehru type outfit. And, without being boastful here, and people knew me at that time as somebody who was elegantly dressed. I always chose to be dressed in a certain way. And so he came to me, Prince Philip, and he says to me, I see everybody with their coattails, etc., and you look quite different. You're from the Caribbean. What make you different? I says, well, it is just a matter of facing the realities of our weather. So that's why I'm dressed that way. And he was impressed with that. So I'm saying that to say this, that our dress code really meant that we were seeking to find our way to be independent and not to be just people are just following the colonial pattern and being overdressed and things of that sort. And so that is what transpired. Well, when the Queen sent Princess Margaret to this ceremony, which was the cabinet ministers present, we were all elated, we were all enamored, we were all excited, we were all, in fact, in a state of euphoria to know that we have brought our country from so many years, from slavery to where it came from the colonial period, and now we are an independent nation. You can imagine the goose flesh, the goosebumps that I had and others had. And what makes me particularly, how would I say it, almost emotional, really, is the fact that the government of the day, the cabinet of the day, everyone have gone to the great beyond, the members of the cabinet. And even with the parliament itself, there may be about two others who remain, which would be Parillon and Eden Bowers, who are members of the parliament. But in terms of the cabinet, every member of the cabinet, including the first set of the persons who went to seek independence, have gone in the great beyond. And I feel a very heavy responsibility to mention the fact that we began a process based upon a philosophy, an ideology, and a vision, And I sit back in an armchair position, being apolitical, not having been called upon by either political parties, or if there's any third exists, I don't know, to be part of whatever is ongoing. So I according to the book by Mr. Christian, I am not prepared to, what was the word he used? Anyway, meaning that hijack my way or work my way into the business of the opposition or government or whatever when not invited. But in my armchair position, I am wondering whether the political persuasions of the day allows people to understand that the reason why you vote for one party or the other, or that one party or the other, becomes important to you in your perception of what Dominica should be, is based on an ideology, is based on a vision, is based on a concept. In other words, in our day, it was about all shall eat, and it had to do with land reform. It had to do with the importance of moving the people from the countryside, which Libla did, into the life of the persons of the cities, etc., Rosso. And so that there wasn't this situation that was brought up in those days of where, the haves was called the bourgeois or bourgeois, and the have-nots were called contributors and so on. So those things were eliminated, had to be eliminated. And so that was the persuasion of the politics of the day. Today's politics, I'm not quite sure how the visionary, ideological, and the policies that direct those things are being addressed, and we were doing housing. For example, as Minister of Housing for a number of years, I was involved directly with the Bath Estate or the Canefield Housing Scheme, as chairman of the Central Housing Planning Authority. Maybe I was about 21, 22 or thereabout. And, we did houses at Kingsale and in Point Michel and Marigot, etc. But the concept then was to ensure that you have a house upon which you could expand later on, You start with, I know you're in construction yourself, Pastor Rodney. So the idea was that you have a house that had the capacity for expansion and growth and development as your family members grow. And we also had the idea also of having on-farm housing, so that houses would be built on the farms of the farmers, so that they would then move into get off their homes and go to work immediately in the surrounding areas. And also the expectation was that houses would be built so that there would have been farms or farming and small livestock in the immediate vicinity. So I see we have moved into apartment buildings and so on, which is a little bit more cosmopolitan and not exactly the vision that we had then. And so it suggests to me that we need to look at what it is that is guiding our policies. You know, whether you be in the government or in the opposition, what is directing you to do what you do, with the ultimate objective of recreating a society that is able to sustain itself.
It seems to me, OJ, that your action plans then were following through with your vision. Your vision, as you well, eloquently said, was to bridge the gap, if you like, between the haves and the have-nots. The fact that those who did not have were considered country bookies, and those who had were the bourgeoisie. So your vision was to do that from way back from E.O. Leblanc. And then your actions in terms of land reform, your actions in terms of housing, your actions in terms of providing access to those who did not have, followed your vision. Would you now say that the actions today is diametrically opposed to that vision, or do you see probably a new vision, to put it that way, for what's happening in the country? And how do you weigh those against the other? Once upon a time, we came from these large estates into people owning their own little plots of land and doing their own little business. It seems today that if it could have been done with a stroke of the pen like you all did it, probably would have reverted back to that time, in my humble position. How do you see that today, and what would be your honest advice as far as the life of the people is concerned?
There's a saying, and I realize you're rolling the coin there. I mean, it's neither head nor tail and so on, and you're giving me some room to maneuver. But there is a saying that the day you stop speaking your mind is the day you begin to die, And as you will recall, I just had an 80th birthday, and God has blessed me with youthfulness and so forth, and energy and zeal and passion for life. And more than that, too, He has given me a spiritual dimension of my life that I didn't have before. And so I am comfortable in my skin to say that I have the privilege of being an elder, being the last remaining member of the parliament of the cabinet, and one of the few remaining of the parliament of the day, to say something which certain persons may not like it because it doesn't fit into their program. But if I don't say it, then I would be doing myself and the God I serve a mischievous disservice. And I don't wish to do that to the man who has brought me to this point in my life. So I would say that I'm diametrically opposed to the ideas that has permeated in terms of the 5-star development programs. I believe that we had begun a mission in tourism, for example, a vision, where we said that we would have done what is referred to as community tourism, as health-oriented tourism, as eco-tourism, and so on. And so I didn't only think about it as just a minister government. After leaving government, I was part of the process of reconstructing the Dominic Hotel and Tourism Association, DDHT. I was a founder member of that new association. Before it was a sort of a bourgeois-based DHA, Dominic Hotel Association, the Fort Youngs and the bigger shots of the country. We brought that down to the point where everybody should participate. I was also a founder member of the Eco Inns, the Small Hotel Association, president and founder member of that one. And so what we were fighting for at the time with organizing with hotels like Anchorage and Cicero and Evergreen and Sims's and Sheophilia's and Exotica, and you name them all, Papilot, Floral Gardens, which won a lot of international prize, which I was the owner of with my wife. And all of us were thinking of how do we turn health tourism into a perspective where persons would come in and stay in those very boutique-oriented, very nice hotels of some kind of ambiance that reflected our nature. And today now we have five-star hotels that are becoming white elephants, you know. And so this millions and billions of dollars have been spent on all those special cases of those who benefited from the CBI money for the five-star hotels, I believe was a wasted effort, because we are not a five-star location per se. We should have and must have a couple of five-star locations where persons with the affluence could come. But what happens to the people from Guadeloupe and Martinique and St. Lucia and Antigua, etc., and so on, who wish to come? What about those who just want to come and just chill out in the countryside? And what about those who want to hike from Germany? In fact, in my business, I was the promoter of tourism, and I traveled widely as the chairman of the National Development Corporation and as a member of the Hotel Association and the Central and the Caribbean Hotel Association. And what we did was to attract people and to bring them into, what you call multi-destination packages and so on, so that people can afford to stay in hotels. Now you talk about 300 US a night. How many people from St. Lucia, Antigua, Guadeloupe, and Martinique have that kind of money? So I think there was a misread there, and I'm not sure I've heard anybody from any of the small hotels that have benefited from the CBI. And so I think I take strong offense to the fact that that vision that was given in the earlier days have been set aside.
Now, I'm glad to hear that from you as well, and being that blunt with your perspective. Now, let me just ask you, go a little bit into the Oliver Seraphin, a little personal information here, because there is something that I would really like you to bring out, because I hear you say that you served with Eco Inns, you served with some of these organizations post your era as even as Prime Minister of Dominica. Is that correct?
Very correct.
Now, let me fast forward that. We are at a place today, 45 years after independence. And there are some things that were introduced. There are some things that were done. There are some things that are being done now. And I'd like you, and that's probably my personal question to you personally as well, that are being done now that is probably markedly different to what was initially envisaged. If my memory serves me right, you were somewhere in the organization along with people like Sheridan Gregoire and the gentleman who died from Canefield, I think it was, in the genesis, for example, of something like the World Creole Music Festival. And if I'm correct on that, how do you see that now versus what it was intended to be or what it was supposed to be then?
Well, you touching all the strings of my mental apparatus, you know.
That's what I do when I interview people. I'm sorry.
And again, this is something again, it is amazing to me. I reflect and thank God that I have this mental attitude to absorb, accept, and enjoy, as it were, situations of where I am as a person and as a personal contributor to my country. If you ask 95, I would say, am I being extreme? Persons below the age of 35 as to who O.J Seraphin is, I would assume that a good 90% of or 95% of the youth don't know of my existence, as it were. And so, a program like yours can be useful in educating. And so the PIC, the NDC, the National Development Corporation, of which I was a member about 5 years prior to 1995, representing the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association on the board.
Hold on, OJ. I want you to maybe emphasize that because, and I'm doing that for a particular reason. Uh, we live it at a time. We live at a time now where um, um, some people think they should discard you. For example, if you are from a particular political, side, and especially for somewhere like you who have served, and they will discard you right after that. I want you to re-emphasize the time frame we're talking about when you became a member of these organizations.
Well, I became a member of the national level. Well, the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association was in the 80s, and early 90s. The membership of the NDC, when I became a member of the National Development Corporation as a director, I came in not as a private person, but I came in as the public relations officer of the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association, described by them as one who should be on the board to represent the interests of the private sector on the NDC board. And I recall Eugenia Charles not being very comfortable with this because of the political background that I carried. And she tried to ensure that another name came forward, and the executive insisted that I be their representative. And so I became a member of that in somewhere about 1990 something, 93 or thereabout. 83, thereabout, shortly after Eugenia Charles got into office. And so the years rolled by, and the DHTA was faltering. We didn't have enough overnight visitors and so on. And the thinking was that there should be something called a Cadres Festival of some sort. And the idea was brought to the board. And that time, the person who was the GM was Charles Seraphin. And, and he did not, in fact, respond quickly. They did not respond quickly. And then shortly after that, in 1995, the government of the day was the United Workers' Party. And strangely enough, I just received a letter in the post informing me without any discussion that I was being made chairman of the board. And as chairman of the National Development Corporation, the matter of the Creole Festival, the Cadres Festival came back up again. At that point, there was a secretary, Stanley Georges was the general secretary, general manager of the board, and he was the one who was persuaded by the board to get a committee going, and that included Sobers Esri, I believe, who was the secretary of the board, and Freddie Nicholas, and a few other people, and of course our dear friend Mark Marie, and so on. And so there, the board sat down and they met. The committee sat down and met and decided that it was not for them sufficiently wide to have just a Cadres Festival. They suggested a Creole Festival. And had some member of the committee, I think Michael Pascal or some Michael Fagan, I believe, who came up with the idea of the world, So that's the genesis of it. And then, of course, that was in 1995, 96 actually. And so that same year, thereabout, the festival commission was also formed by the NDC board. And the board comprised of very important people in our society. There's a lot of persons who were very dynamic, persuasive. Sheridan Gregor was one of them, who eventually became the GM, by the way, the general manager of the NDC. And he also took over from there, and he persuaded the process of going forward. He was the link between the government and ourselves. He was very close to the Prime Minister of the day, Edison James. He was also very close to the two ministers that control the NDC, which is Timothy and Prevost. He was very good friends of theirs. And strangely enough, Sheridan was my connection to the government, because the government never really sat with me personally and directed my decision making, because they saw me as a labor right. However, at that time, they wanted the best that they could get to persuade the NDC in a certain direction, and which is what came out of this. And so the Creole Festival was born out of that situation. Strangely enough, though, at some point, there was a fellow called Toulon who was employed as the first executive director of the commission, and just as an employee. And but for some reason, history had it as if he came up with the Creole Festival. Of course, Gordon Henderson came in as our ambassador. He was the one who promoted the idea in places like the tri-state with television and radio programs there. He did that in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and he did a tremendous job at the early stages. And there was that vision, we were thinking really at the time that because of the need, for bringing the cultures of the Creole cultures within that exist within the Caribbean areas, including Haiti, of course, and Guadeloupe and Martinique and so forth, and also Louisiana and parts of Africa and so on. That was the intention, to create for Dominica an energy and a zeal and a passion for Creolism, and that is what this thing is about. And today I see we move into all kinds of bacchanal and, music that brings you to another euphoric state and all that kind of thing, drum beaten by a machine and things of that sort. And there was something that we had planned which never came to fruition, even so many years later, and which was the drum festival, because there was the idea that Guadeloupe and Martinique, and coming from our enslavement period, the slavery days and so forth, that the drums would have been Grand Bay was very famous for drum beating, also the production of drums, etc. in Grand Bay. And so drums were supposed to be a drum festival, or supposed to have been added on, which never came through in any way that I can detect. And of course, we saw that the need for the clothes of the Dominican people reflect that. And I was appalled when I saw people with the madras and so forth and dancing in the streets to bouillon, some kind of loud music and so on, when they should be dancing to the drums. They should be dancing to the belly, to the music, the accordion, and the more reflective music of our culture. And we should be a little bit more dignified with our Creole clothes, not jamming in a band behind a truck and so on. And so, we have lost our way, brother. And so that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last, almost 45, 50 minutes, we've been speaking with Oliver James Seraphin, one of the last remaining parliamentarians who was instrumental in ensuring that we got independence in 1978, and maybe the only surviving person who went, in fact, to that trip along with the rest of the cabinet ministers. And so we are discussing this whole issue. We've done a historical perspective. We're doing some applications as to what the intentions were and where we are now. And listen, I'm about to open the lines to you now. You have a question for O.J Seraphin. You can call in to ask that. The numbers are 449-3095, 3096, and 3097. You can do the digit thing on 616-4257. And if you're calling internationally, you do 305-432-9624. All right. We're talking with O.J Seraphin. We'll be here for another few minutes. O.J, let me again kind of push you a little bit into the then and now, right? And there have been lots of water under the bridge, and we see a lot of things happening today that is probably different to what the intentions were when we gained independence. Today, you look at us 45 years later from where you used to be. Where have we gone wrong, do you think?
I think we have gone wrong in the sense that we need to re-inculcate the freedom of thought. In other words, if you have an idea and the idea is sound and the idea is good, it doesn't really matter which part of the political divide you belong to. And I think that's the example of that is that the UWP, Edison James, knew at the time when he appointed me or their cabinet, that included, of course, persons like Timothy and Prévost, who knew me personally. In fact, they were close associates of mine, despite the fact that they were in a politic era that I was not. And he took a chance with me, because he felt that I had something to offer on the table. And similarly, I think what we need to, where we lost our way, is that we failed to accept that someone may be able to be available to the resources, the resource bank of Dominica, in spite of the apparent politics, because politics is not designed to create what you call polarization for the sake of polarization. The political process requires a unison on a vision. In other words, what's the ideological platform? What is the shared vision? And I think we lost that opportunity. And I can talk for myself. The Prime Minister would not obviously be opposed to the fact that I did bring to him many projects. There was a shipping project, for example. I had 2 boats, roll on, roll off, refrigerated. And one of the boats stayed in Dominica for 4 to 5 months without getting a license. And then I was going up and down the ministry step, and members of the government of the day will recall that I knocked their doors, Ian Douglas and all of the others. And that there was one minister who even brought I think the guy of Drygo, and I'll mention names because this is the truth. And he brought in fact, I persuaded his PS to present my project to the cabinet. And I lobbied every cabinet minister to approve the project because government had said that they were investing in shipping. And I brought the boat and it was there. It was just a question of processing the relationship, the PPP, the public-private partnership. And there was a cabinet paper. And when it reached cabinet, Mr. Douglas turned around to Drygo and said, listen, this comes from my ministry. And although Drygo was agriculture and he was just trade, he said, I'll deal with the matter. And he removed it from cabinet. Yeah, Ian Douglas did that to me, And there were ministers of government that I have approached on various projects, that somehow or the other, there was a project that I had for the post office to use the post office as a place to launch the movement of a lot of pamphlets and flyers for major corporations in the United States. And this minister who has left, guy from Point Michel, whatever his name is right now, declined to see me and refused to see me and so forth. And then whilst I was there, I see a young lady going in his office. And, so this disrespect and disregard for persons like ourselves and others, there are many people who have come to government with projects, and they were not brought into the process of establishing the ideas, merely because they may have been sought or seen as persons who do not come in and do the mea culpa, like my father is a very proud man, and people could be super proud people, And he always taught me, listen, stand on your feet, don't bow, don't bow. And I have never known myself to ever bow to anybody except for the Creator. And so, because I didn't bow and I haven't bowed to anyone, sometimes the projects that I bring forward may not have been accepted. And so that's the reality. You asked me where we went wrong. Where we can reverse that trend, though, is to start listening. I heard Afi Martin saying that he had met with the Prime Minister and that he told him something about the need to respond to people with ideas, and the Prime Minister told him to bring the names, There are many names that I know of, including myself, There are many projects that in fact, let me just give you one. That's very important. And I'll name names because it's important to name those people. Name and shame them. I happen to have been the one when the people of Dominica, when the government had a problem, somewhere about 1999 or thereabout, there was that situation where a mountain fell in the river of Layu and it created a dam and so forth. And all the sun came down and blocked the bridges and whatnot. And there it was. I was able to get my company, TP Gordon, to go in and clear the area and, to create an avenue for free movement of traffic at our cost. And it was determined that the sand that's taken we could sell and so forth. When the new government came in a couple of years after, a year or two after, I got a letter from Austria. And he said to me that I am contaminating and whatever it is, the river by having my heavy equipment in the river. And he kicked me out, and the royal family put barbed wire fences and locked me out, and I lost my business, $1 million business. And I lost it. And guess what? in the years to follow, people like Jack Cadacan and other people are in the river up to today. They're in the river. So I'm saying that this is what you talk about, the vision. We, those of us who have that energy, and I could talk about, we would have to have a program for 2 hours to tell you about projects that I brought to the government and which was not taken for reasons being that OJ is not one of us. You know, how can I not be one of you when I'm you? I am it. I'm a Dominican.
Yeah.
You know, my father came from the listen. I was the godfather of E.C. Loblack's daughter. I was the godfather of what's his name? Mr. Just slips me right now. Our Minister of Government, Ducre, N.E.N. Ducre's thing. So I came all the way back there. These are the people who are the founders, you know, of the Labour Party. And I'm godfather of their children. And as a little boy, I'm sorry to turn around and treat me as if I don't belong to what belongs to me. And so my thinking here is we need to redress. It's not too late. Never is too late. If we could go back a little bit, ease our legs off the pedal, reflect, and allow persons that have ideas and thought processes. I'm getting a little too old for those things these days. I still have a little bit of, you know, wind in my sails. But I'm saying that we should allow people, don't allow people who just come and say about PM and PM and PM. No. You need people with ideas to come forward and give them a free chance to process those ideas and make it work. That's the only way Dominica can move forward.
I agree. Let's take a few telephone calls, OJ. Good morning. You are joining the conversation with Oliver James Seraphin on Independence.
Blessings to you, Honorable. What's up?
I'm doing very, very well, thanks.
The other Honorable, blessings to you and thanks for service to country, my brethren.
Yeah, thank you. Blessings. By the way, let me take this opportunity to say to you that you are sagacious. You may not be erudite in the way in which you get credentials, but you are a brave soul and you speak your mind. Not everybody will agree with what you have to say, but certainly you say it with impact and with effect. And I appreciate you for who you are.
I am honored. Thank you, sir. God blessings to you, sir, and more life to you. The drastic and rapid transition in the impact it has had on Dominica. Do you think it was coincidental or accidental or systematic and deliberate in the impact or the effect in which it is having on Dominica based on the same bourgeoisie and the country bookie mentality? Who may have influenced that drastic and rapid transition to our own detriment? I hope I'm not too complicated. Blessings, sir.
Blessings, your man of words. Yeah, let me just say this to you, Blessings. You know, we won the fight, man. You know, sometimes you win a battle and you don't even understand that the battle has been won. We won the fight. You know, there have been the social revolution have taken place, you know. We have Pastor Rodney, an example of that, you know, who is an erudite spokesperson of the Lord, you know, on our land. And we have doctors, we have lawyers. If you have to do a research, sometimes I wonder how much I should say, but I will continue. If you have to do a research, you will find that 80% of the lawyers of today come from the Maliwe community, children of the farmers and children of the countryside, the country bookies you call them, those children. The doctors, the same thing. And it all began through a process. And again, here I go again, where the Cuban scholarship program was particularly significant in that change, where the majority of our doctors are now Cuban trained. Why? Because I happened to have been at the UN at the time in 79, where Fidel and myself sat next to each other when I was looking for aid for post-Hurricane David and so forth. And he then invited me to the non-aligned conference and so forth. And his people agreed that there was a need for help in Dominica. I couldn't bring him in because of the Western situation with the British and the English, US influences, that we couldn't bring them in together and be in the same place at the same space. But he did say that, okay, we could have scholarships. And then Bernard Wilshire then went up there and represented me as the extra-rural department person and so on. He went up to that conference, and he did say that he spoke to somebody and so forth and what have you. But that matter was already in process through the arrangements with Fidel Castro for the scholarship program. And I keep on hearing other people, the people who are supposed to have done the Cuban scholarship program and what have you. But anyway, the bottom line is that the Cuban scholarship program continued. And of course, Douglas, give him his credit. After the Labour Party got out of government in 80, and I got out of the leader of the party in 85, he continued the process of receiving scholarships for people from the countryside and so on. So that's a good thing, and he continued it. But it began with me. And similarly, can be said of something that a lot of people haven't realized, and that is that the educational program began at the schools in the north when the St. Andrews High School came about. When Reverend Gomes approached me and with people like Early Castor and Edison James and others, the idea was to move the Wesley High School in Dominic in Roseau, which was damaged, to have it up in the north. And so the children of the north was given, like, I started the bus program, free busing from the Carib territory. And today we see that prior to that, if you had about 5 or 10 Caribs go to grammar school or academy, that's a lot. And then from the St. Andrews High School, and of course the school of Martin Roberts in Maryland, then came this movement of education for the Carib people. I wouldn't be surprised if the present president, in fact, was one of those who came out of the St. Andrews High School experiment. And it worked, and then Northeastern, of course, came about, and later on Castle Bruce and so forth. But education became a means by which, through the Cuban scholarship program, through St. Andrews, of which I was directly involved, demonstrated an ability for people to learn and earn and grow. And today, most of our doctors, or many of our lawyers, and all of them from the indigenous community, the Kalinago people, come from that experience of having an opportunity to go to high school. So that foundation has been built, and it has crystallized. And where I'm going with this is to say this. I'm calling upon those people who got educated through a system of culture, of understanding the need to help the Malawi, that such persons know that they've become who they are, the lawyers and the doctors and the professionals, they have a right to give back. And to give back means that they must now come to the forefront and express their vision in a very articulate way, in a very positive way, in a very dynamic way, that in fact there'll be no doubt that Dominica has emerged from the days of bourgeoisism into the days where all persons are equal.
All right, thank you very much for that. O.J, somebody else is on the telephone. Good morning.
Yes, Pastor Rodney.
Yes, good morning.
Good program.
Thank you.
I am a child of the 50s. And Mr. Seraphin, all what you are saying is very true. It's like you, or I would say that, like, you know when you have a record and somebody playing it back for you, I'm just there listening, and everything you are saying is so true. Because if I have to start, I will never finish of all what you are saying.
So don't start.
So I will not start. I'm just listening. And maybe you don't know me, but I know you. Because I could remember I used to work in the banana shed in Fokole, and your mother had a shop. And that lady fell in love with me as a child. And she would make sure that if I am hungry, I get something to eat. I could remember once I was carrying banana on the little pathway, and I fell in the sea. And that lady made sure she get a dress, to put on me so that I could be warm again. Right. So kudos to you, Mr. Seraphin. And I mean, I know we're getting older, but I wish the young people could hear that history, and they could, because you see the young people, they get them drunk, they get them stupid, and they're not hearing nothing. Even though you would tell them the history that they doesn't listen. But kudos to you, sir, and have a blessed day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Another call here. Good morning. Thanks for joining the conversation with Oliver James Seraphin.
Good morning, Mr. O.J.
Good morning. Good morning.
And Solomon Lane, I love you there too. Pamela, I am listening to you, but you know what I found out about you? As though you're really talking, but you cry inside. As though that's my feeling, that you are crying. You did what you have to do, and you don't want to do something more, but you not allow. That is how the world goes on. But all what you have done is recorded in the book of God. So I want to say to you there, don't worry what happened. You have done your share. Let others do what they are doing. If people take up thing against you, just let them do their deal. God will deal with that. God bless you. Joseph, all of them, they're still my neighbor. I go to visit them all the time, all your nephews and son there. God bless you, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you for
Joining
those
the conversation with Oliver James Seraphin. Good morning.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Pastor Rodney. I made the point a while ago to the transition and rapid and drastic is from where we once were as an independent country bookie people, because we still, after we move from the country bookie mentality, the independence we gain with bananas, agriculture predominantly, and now all the farm roads have been neglected. Every form of our independent livelihood, is that accidental, that transition, or deliberate or systematic? Thank you.
Thank you too as well. It's 23 minutes moving up to 9 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. I did promise we'll be here until 8:30. It's already past that time. And in a few minutes, we will wind that down, that conversation with O.J Seraphin here this morning. But O.J, I want us to, in coming down to this, there is so much more that we can touch on this, so many details that we can look at. Today, there are people who say, and it's frequent, that we have independent people in Dominica. We may not be an independent nation. One would think of independence as gaining both political independence and some level of economic independence, some equality and maybe parity, if you call it, in the life of the individuals. Your summary statement as to what that is, where that is, and how do you see it?
All right. What I'd like to say is, first of all, let me just thank the two callers, for their connections with my family. I'm blessed by the fact that my mother was who she was, a generous lady to almost everyone. She was given an accolade by the people of Funkole before she passed away, and my father the same, as receiving a Domino accreditation by Domino Association and so on for his contribution to dominoes in the country and so on. So I come from a family of contribution, and for which I must say that I meet people in my walks of life throughout the cities that I travel, in every place that I go to, and especially those persons, in their 40s and above or late 30s, who acknowledge the fact that they recognize that there were some efforts made to make a contribution and make a change. And so where you have asked that question seems to lead me into the thinking that we need to reprogram our minds. We stop knocking the messengers, stop knocking the messenger. You're a good messenger yourself, Pastor Rodney, and there are many people who attack you not on the message that you give, but on the fact that you might be a Pentecostal pastor, or the fact that you're non-Catholic, and or because you're saying something that is not seem to be in harmony with the powers that be, etc., etc. But no society can grow and evolve and develop unless it finds itself, within its consciousness. Go deep within and start to accept the fact that we all have a right to be here. And God gave each of us a gift. I mean, there are children who are artists and who have become musicians and so on at an early age, precocious and what have you, because that's the gift that God gave to them. So God gave each of us a gift. And the waste of that gift is what would be the sin, because it's like when God said, give the people different, assets, and say, you have one, you have three, and you have five. And what did you do with what you have? The one with the 5 multiplied 3 multiplied 1 hit it and say, I was afraid of you. So I'm saying that I'm getting down and in counting downwards, and there's a cost to pay, for everything that you say and do. But accept the fact that the cost has to be based upon, are you in the bosom of the Lord doing what he tells you to do, that he brought you here to do, etc. And so when I see a young generation, like when I travel home frequently, and I see what I see, which is a bunch of young men loitering in the blocks and just riding motorcycles, and seem to be at a loss as to what next to do. I am redirecting my thought process to say this, that we need to re-examine ourselves and stop just being blinded by the situations of the Song of Bala, of Baal, sorry, and of and probably seek to find what is there in using the word Bala now, Jacko and so forth. And those are the old slave persons who the Negma ones, with their attitude towards believing in themselves and articulating which they have to do. So I'm trying to create for me a thought process that here we have a problem in our country. There are lots of people who die in very regularly, more than usual. We have to examine what is it. Is it a spirit of death that's in our country? If so, what has brought it about? We have to re-engender a desire to look at spirituality and look more in depth as to what we're here for. What is our purpose? And our purpose can't be to serve a man, but our purpose is to serve our God. And so we need to re-examine those things, and we need to articulate. We need to find ways in which the agriculture has to re-evolve to where it was before. The movements of goods, the Virgin Islands, more than most places these days. And even in there, you find that the food products are coming out of Santo Domingo, and certainly from certain parts of the US, but not from Dominica anymore. And so we look at where we were before, and we need to find ourselves back into that place, that positive place where each and every one of us could hold an opinion. I've been to Dominica, I've been speaking to people, and when they want to speak to me, they look around and at their back or on their sides to see who's listening, and that kind of thing. And so when we reach into a place where we don't have temerity, we don't have confidence, we don't have the audaciousness and the resolve to take on upon ourselves the desire to speak our minds openly and freely without fear of consequence, I think unless we get to that point, our country will continue to go downwards.
Very succinct. Very, very, very succinct. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a conversation that I wish that we would have all the time. And I shared when I started with you this morning, I did say that probably at 45, we should be doing some reflection as to where we are, where we've been, where we've gone wrong, and what we should be doing. And that's the kind of conversation I was really hoping that would have been much wider, OJ, with many more people from a very pragmatic perspective, so that we can go on and begin to do some things that will enable us to change. While I say that, I want you to know, OJ, that in our audience is Gabriel Christian, and he's been enjoying the program and listening, and he has asked me to share his number with you, and I will do that as well, because he was part and parcel of the PIC, the Popular Independence Committee, I think it was at the time. Someone's on my telephone. Good morning. Thanks for joining the conversation with O.J Seraphin.
Good morning, Pastor Rodney, and how are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Good, and welcome to the Honorable O.J Seraphin on your show. Good morning, O.J. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Praise God for that.
Good. That's excellent. Got a quick question for you. I do understand what you're talking about and understand the direction that you're stating that we should be heading to, and trying to use our talents and opportunities in order to make changes for our country. But one of the things I kind of concerned about is when you were on Al Jazeera, showing that you were participating in passport sales of Dominica. Where were your thoughts at that time? Right? Why didn't you stand up at the time and tell the guys that you're working for that, hey, you know what? This is not the way Dominica should go. This is not the direction. This is not the seed we should be sowing for our youth, and this is not the direction the country should be going. Where were you at that time, and where was your mind in order to direct and influence our people as to doing what is right? Because the seed that's sown is what we're reaping now. And the way I look at it, you assisted in sowing that seed. Right? So sometimes a lot of talking right now in terms of trying to correct it, the tree's already grown. Right? And going to be hard for us to turn that back. I want to hear your point of view on that. Thank you.
My brother, how did I not expect such a response? Because um, we as Dominicans, we are extremely good at bringing down whatever messenger there is. We are very articulate about it, and we are very focused on this. So that whilst you throughout the conversations, there were so many positives, but one would like to touch that negative, and it would require a whole program to explain this. But let me make it so simple for you. Number one, what you said is totally and completely incorrect. I never did was involved with anything to do with passports. There never was anything in that that initiated that thought that you have, and you will go back and play it, and whoever else is looking will look back and see that has nothing to do with it. I was employed as I have been, and for those who may have zero interest in my well-being or a little bit or somewhat more, the reality is that I have survived and lived and taken care of my family as a consultant. I've been a consultant with the CDB on the craft development programs. I've been a consultant with various government agencies, with the OECS, with joint ventures with Martinique and the OECS community. I've been working with the government of St. Vincent, Minister of Agriculture there on certain types of trade movements of shipping, etc., etc. I've worked with bringing investors to Antigua through the government of the Prime Minister Brown and so on. So I'm a consultant. And I was approached. I had this gentleman who was involved with setting up and putting up a 5-star development program in Monacuma, which Sam Raphael was able to get the government to respond, which we were unable to do, and so on. So I've been around the block, for many years, operating within the region. And let me just say this. I was employed to meet with someone who wanted to do development projects in Dominica. Nothing to do with passports at all. Absolutely nothing to do with passports. And so that's first of all, you start off on the wrong premise. Secondly, what I did say to the gentleman when I gave him some background, some information, as my client on the what do you call that, non-disclosure agreement, which was broken by my client, Leo Ford, who introduced me to the gentleman, and they were in a clandestine operation. I didn't know that, so they talked to me, and I openly spoke to my friend Leo Ford and his friend, who was turned out to be a journalist from Al Jazeera. And in their communications with me, they asked me what I thought process was. And I did what exactly was at part of the last community discussions that was taking place recently, where the intention of how do you assist each political party to get, support for their campaign. And I suggested to the man that, hey, there's an election about to take place, and that what he should do is to contribute to both campaigns, both government and opposition. So I was really even-handed and suggested a figure of $400,000 US, which would have been the amount for a campaign for public PA systems and so on. Give it to both sides, and when the election is over, one of them will have won, and as a consequence, they might consider his qualifications. Incidentally, this person was a member of various organizations internationally, world-renowned, really accepted, high-end person of high quality, and he wanted to become an ambassador. And I said, well, to do so, you have to get it through the government. And I explained to him how he goes about it. Then he suggests that he would like to do that for many governments. I did say to him, well, fine, I can go to the governments of the region. It'll cost him $50,000 in order for me to go to Antigua and St. Lucia and St. Vincent, Grenada, and so on, because I wouldn't pay it from my pocket. He has to pay for it. And then these are the figures that he asked me about. He needed a lawyer to represent him, to have someone that he could get information about the various challenges that he'd face as an investor. I suggested to him a name of an attorney. I also suggested to him the quantum that must be paid. So people kind of, got caught up in this kind of euphoria, I would say, and like, oh boy, we caught him, and so in his hands in the cookie jar. I asked for $50,000, which is small change for what the kind of things that I would like to do. With an investor, if you ask me to work for you, you got to pay me. And so that's how whoever it is who's asked me the question, you get paid by your employer or by persons you're employed with. And there was never, ever a matter of any passport for sale.
Thanks for giving us this brief response. The rest of you, sorry about that on the telephone. You can try that call again. We're going to go up until 9 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock, we'll shut this down. So if you want to call in, do that now and be very brief. And I'm also going to ask OJ to summarize and be very brief with his responses. Good morning. Thanks for joining the conversation with O.J Seraphin.
Mr. Seraphin, me that with you, I will not entertain that caller because he know who that sowed that seed in Dominica. During your time, this kind of behavior we have in Dominica could never happen in Dominica. Never, never. It could never happen in Dominica.
All right,
you
thanks.
know who that sowed this seed. Let him go and look for the sower. You are not the sower.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much. You can call again. I said we have about 8 more minutes on the program this morning as you join the conversation with us and OJ. What we did this morning was that we went back to explore the genesis of independence. Why did the initiators of this wanted us to be independent? And I'm so happy, OJ, that you shared the whole thought about making sure that we had to change the numbers around so that the 5% of people owning almost 80% of the property and so the economic well-being of the nation was not equally shared. I'm happy that you lifted up the whole question of certain areas in the country must be left for the people. The beach, for example, the rivers, for example. Somebody else on the telephone, please make your question or comment very brief. Thank you for joining the conversation with O.J Seraphin.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. O.J Seraphin, thanks, Mr. Seraphin, for coming out and speak truth to power. Thank Pastor Rodney for getting Mr. O.J Seraphin to come on your program. Thank you, gentlemen. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's take one more call here. Good morning. Thanks for joining the conversation with O.J Seraphin.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Pastor. Yeah, and good morning, Prime Minister, Mr. Seraphin. Mr. Seraphin, don't make these guys not in your spirit. Yeah, you are the best Prime Minister of Dominica. You have love for your people. Mr. Skerritt can never come in your food. You have to will and come again. And thanks for the independence. And the struggle continues. But don't worry, these guys. Yeah, and they come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. OJ, that's what happens when we're on the radio like this. You have all kinds of comments coming from everywhere. You have the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Always prepared for it, no problem.
I am sure about that. I'm sure about that. Let's take this down and let's hear from you. You look very young for your age. And, if you don't tell people your numbers, they would not think that you have all those numbers. When I got introduced to you, I got introduced because of your flamboyance and your eloquence that drew me to pay attention to you. And I said to somebody some time ago, maybe it's also because I had a crush on one of your daughters at the time.
All right. No problem. You're forgiven.
But listening to you share what the vision was for independence and where we are today, I'm glad that we could have actually done that journey. And in just a moment, I'm going to give you the opportunity, of course, to share your final comments. I'm going to take that final call, and then I'll have you do that. On the telephone, thanks for joining the conversation with O.J Seraphin.
Hello, good morning, gentlemen. I'm from Stacia. I'm calling from Stacia in the house.
Good morning. How are you, man?
I'm good. Mr. Seraphin, I born in the 70s, so I have some knowledge about you and the party. But I live in the camp at Melvin Hall, so I know I'm going to ask a question. You said early on that 95 to a high percent of those who own the land and business, the wealthy in those days. How do you compare that today with those who own the land now and the business on the island? Thank you.
Thank you very much. OJ is going to answer your question. And at the same time, OJ, I'm sure you will provide for us some concluding remarks as we wind down this conversation.
Well, the lands of Dominica, as you know, in Wesley, was lands. I became very popular as a political leader in the Wesley area because there are lots of lands in Wesley which was acquired, Crown lands which was acquired, and given to the people of Wesley, as was in Marigot. Kayam Book, for example, cooperative was formed in Marigot and so on, and so they became landowners there. In places like, of course, the wet area, lands were distributed to many, many people. Of course, lands in Belleville-Chopin was also distributed. Lands in Elrose and Company's, lands in Soufrière was also done that year as well. And most importantly, we have those lands in Mount Prosper and Wharton Wave. And a little quick history was that the government of Eugenia Charles decided that she was giving back all those lands that had acquired for the people, and they went to court. And I believe it was Ronan David who represented the government, especially in the case of Wharton Wave and Mount Prosper. And Babs Dyer, who's still alive, will attest to that he was representing a client who was a cousin of mine. It went to court, and the court was able to prove that the lands were properly acquired by my government. And guess what? The Wharton Waven area now has become the hub of our form of tourism, which has to do with nature-based and so on, baths and so forth, sulfur baths and whatnot. And there are lots of local people who are enjoying the benefit of that particular decision-making process. And so when you talk about land reform, you name it. I'm Mr. Land Reform, as far as if I want to sound too egotistic here. But I must say it because the historians, the sages, the persons of eminence and quality and capacity to give information fail to say it, so I'll say it. As well as Picard, we saw where Picard came in, and of course there's the ownership of lands in Picard by the people who were able to build up those mansions in Picard, which we know the story of Picard, that's for another time. And of course, those lands were acquired by my government and given to people in Picard to build those mansions, and they become instant millionaires and so forth. So if you want to ask me a question about those things, these are the indirect situations. Now, as to new ownership of lands and surveys department, you could inquire as to who owns it and who doesn't. But there are obviously some situations that we need to address. When we look at you from Statia, I think you said, but if you look at places like the BVI, Tortola, the people of Tortola, government of Tortola, make sure that the land of Tortola, the properties of Tortola, the business of Tortola, the assets of Tortola are owned by Tortolians. And I think we must borrow from that page, that we must ensure that all things that has to do with Dominica must be Dominica first. And there were days when the private sector, the mercantile sector would be a Madge and a Mary Ostry and many other local people who had stores and so on around and about. Today we see them transplanted with the Chinese and so on. So we need to examine that. Are we losing control of our country? And if so, what do we do about it? And so these are reflections. But in conclusion, let me just say this. I think that the opportunity for me to conclude is to say this, that I enjoy the love and appreciation from Dominicans far and wide who I meet with on a constant basis. I understand fully the demise that they have, that they are not able to speak out for fear of losing certain benefits. I too have had that same problem, where certain situations I couldn't address because of certain sensitive matters that I'm dealing with the government, and I promised my family that I would not engage in any kind of situation that would be too emphatically, put it this way, confrontational. And I keep in that peace and I'm keeping that position until all matters are resolved. My family be satisfied that I'm free to talk as I wish. But so does so many other Dominicans. So I'm saying that we must get ourselves out of that and find our way back on track as being just honest people, honest brokers, and let truth come to the fore. Our lawyers, well, the recent lawyers, generations, have shown that the old lawyers who were privileged, come from privileged families. Today's lawyers come from Malawi. And so I'm saying that they should take their place and voice their opinions about matters. They are now educated, the doctors who have come from Cuba, etc., from various administrations, particularly from my administration and that of the United Workers' Party and the Labour Party. They came in and they've got the benefit. They should stand up and, speak truth. Not necessarily hostile to the administration, but certainly add in to the areas of information so that we will then have a mastermind. We have Dominicans who are trained throughout the world. I mean, in every conceivable way that they have been trained. Why are they silent? Why they're not contributing? Or why they're not allowed to contribute? And so I'm saying that at this point in time, we need to re-examine agriculture. The craft sector, for example, was one I was involved with. I brought craft to Miami, to Guadeloupe, to Martinique, to St. Martin, to St. Croix, to Paris, to Germany, and so forth, where my father, my family, my wife and I, we were involved with that craft distribution and sales, from the blind workshop from Granby, from, with the hats from Granby, the mats from Granby, from Penville the baskets, from Trafalgar with the boats, and from Luda. All of this, there's a lot of energy that was there that has gone somewhere in some direction. The question of blues having teas, and the fact that we use our herbs to create teas for sale in the supermarkets within the region, we need to re-examine ourselves and revert to where we were before, and forget all this petty politics. For example, after this program, you will hear my name bandied about in some other programs and some other station, bashing me for what? Because I spoke my mind? I'm saying that people should be allowed to speak.
Thank you very, very much, OJ, and thanks for agreeing to speak with me this morning. Thanks to Mr. G for making sure that was possible. And of course, share my love with your lovely wife and family out there. And of course, we all love you. Thanks to all of you who joined us and contributed, and you paid attention. Some of you stayed with me for all the time. I'm glad that you did that. OJ, you have a very good day. And I know today, as the 3rd of November, will always bring you back some memories. And I trust that as you do that, the grace of the Lord will be upon you and his blessings will shine upon you.
Thank you very much. It is my season. Whenever I hear Creole Festival, I know whether I give him the praise or not, but I was associated with its involvement. I also know that independence was a part of me as well. And so I feel comfortable when I lie down in my bed and I reflect on my life. I say, thank you, God, for bringing me through what you have brought me through. And I'm happy to have friends like you, Pastor Rodney. And of course, Mr. G was a neighbor who invited me. I say, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I hope I didn't abuse it.
Have a good one. Have a good one. Thank you very, very much. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we bring down the curtains on the conversation, the extended version of Rise and Shine for today, November 3rd, 2023. I'm glad I could have been here to do that with you and for you. I hope you have a very good day today, and we'll see somewhere today in my Wob Creole. All right. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon every one of you.
Amen.